Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is one of the last sessions of the day. Victoria and I are excited to welcome this one. You have been with us for the past 2 days, and what a joy it has been. But the big question is, what can the Commonwealth do in its unique position to improve outcomes in the area of health, justice, climate justice, and freedom of expression, all things that we have been discussing over the past 2 days? We recognize that we have with us those who have worked tirelessly and in trust with Commonwealth institutions, and it's important we hear from them. There are also new leaders and ideas ready to invigorate and improve the Commonwealth. We want to hear your reflections. Victoria, who are our panelists this afternoon?
Well, Mark, I'm glad you asked. And I think the most important or prominent individual that we have on the panel is Her Excellency, Right Honourable Patricia Scotland. And she's the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. And she has a career that has been marked by achieving a number of extraordinary firsts, not least of which she was the first woman to be in more than 700-year history of the office to serve as Her Majesty's Attorney General for England, Wales, and for Northern Ireland. While holding these and other senior ministerial offices, she was given the responsibility for gender equality, domestic violence, forced marriage, and international child abduction. And from these positions, promoted diversity and equal opportunity, particularly for women and girls. Now, as the only woman appointed Secretary General of the Commonwealth, she is placing special emphasis on mobilizing the 54 nations of the Commonwealth to tackle climate change, which we discussed in the last couple of days, including its disproportionate impact on women, and through women's enterprise to build the resilience of small and more vulnerable countries. Welcome, Your Excellency, to this forum. It is such an honor to have you join us. A round of applause for her.
Yes, please.
We also have Her Excellency Sudha Devi Vasudevan, who is the chair of the Commonwealth Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us as well. Round of applause for her. And we also have Dr. Linda Yu, who we are very familiar with. She moderated the earlier session as we looked at various issues. Thank you for joining us from the Royal Society of the Commonwealth. Thank you for joining us. Who else do we have, Mark?
Well, we have Alicia Wallace is here with us this afternoon. We also have, again, Dr. Justin Coonan is back with us. And also, and I have to say this correctly, Ineza is with us this afternoon as well. All right.
Fantastic. So before we get the conversation started, I think it's prudent that we take a look at a series of talks that I actually moderated late last year. And it was termed Critical Conversations. And we talked to different actors within the Commonwealth from different ages, different backgrounds, different countries and cultures to give their take on the Commonwealth in its current state and where it could go. So let's take a look at this clip and what they had to say, and then we'll get some reactions.
The Commonwealth is a bit of a sleepy hollow, and we've got to stir it up a bit. Stir things up, because that's how you make progress.
When we have a conversation about the Commonwealth, it is still at a higher level, and that doesn't really mean much to the person on the ground who is having their rights violated.
I think the Commonwealth leaders have to decide whether this is an institution of the past or an institution of the future.
What the Commonwealth has to be is people-led. A meaningful change in the Commonwealth is that it needs to start to become a binding institution.
We need more people-driven action. One of the things that I've noticed as an advocate is that government officials can go off to international spaces and make these promises, and the people at home never hear about it.
From a Caribbean perspective, what we are seeing in the Commonwealth is an ethical crisis around equality, an ethical crisis around shared values that really are being threatened every day.
Let's face it, the Commonwealth has to live down its past, right? It exists because of colonization. So in a sense, to prove international solidarity, it really has to undo all of that.
Right now, I feel like it is the opportune moment for the Commonwealth to reposition itself as that vehicle that helps to advocate further for its member states who are largely low-income and middle-income countries.
So I think that the Charter is actually a great way to start, actually, in a lot of conversations and in a lot of ways in which we approach our work on the ground as well. Because what it gives us, it gives us a framework to sort of organize ourselves with. These are also common ideas and concepts and ideologies that seem to be the thread holding the Commonwealth together as well.
I'm going to ask you to just respond with some thoughts on what you saw on this video today. If you could.
I'm going to say that again because clearly there are people in this room. Well, hello, everyone. Hello. Yeah, that's what I need. I was told that this was the most vibrant, exciting, dynamic group of people. I walk in and there's silence. So this is the moment that I've been waiting for. Anne nobbled me, if I'm frank, on the flight over because my diary was a nightmare. And she said, "You will make time for us," to which I will always respond, always, always. So all of those who will tell you I shouldn't be here and I should be a figment of your imagination, tell them I never came. It is an amazing joy for me to be here with you and to respond to some of the questions that was on that film. And the last comment was probably the most important because it spoke about our charter. And if you can remember, that was a charter which took 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days for us to agree. And that's because our Commonwealth is made up of 2.5 billion people from 5 different regions, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. And what we're good at is listening. And it took 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days to hear what we had in common. And if you look at that charter, which was signed by Her Majesty the Queen on all our behalf in Marlborough House in 2015, it foreshadowed the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at who Ban Ki-moon chose to write those Sustainable Development Goals, almost all of them were members of the Commonwealth. And I think what they did is get out of our charter and go clause 1, poverty, clause 2 to 1 to 16, and SDG 17, which is partnership, is right at our heart. But people are right at our heart. And I'd invite you all to look at what our charter starts with. It doesn't say we the governments. It says we the people. The people. So the civil society is fundamental to our Commonwealth. We, all of us, everyone in this room, are the arbiters of who the Commonwealth is. And so this People's Forum, which is particularly dynamic and inspiring, is critical to our future. And I was therefore determined to be with you here today for that purpose. And I hope everyone familiar with the nature of our Commonwealth, because it says a lot about who we are and why we're a family. Because As you all know, we span 5 continents. We have 54 countries, a suggestion we may have 2 more coming. 32 of the world's 42 small states are in our Commonwealth, and 25 members of our family are small island developing states, 2/3 of the global whole. And the Commonwealth countries are 20% more likely to trade with one another. Same countries enjoy 21% lower trade costs. But together, we've been able to do some remarkable things. And the remarkable things have dotted throughout our whole history. Because lots of people have forgotten we're not the old Commonwealth. We're the new Commonwealth. The new Commonwealth which put aside the old colonial empire and took on a new mantle. And that new mantle was built on the highest issues and fundamental precepts of man, and talked about our humanity, our partnership between all of us and all the races. It's really important to remember that it was in 1953, at a time of great racial division, anxiety, and angst, that Her Majesty the Queen said that our Commonwealth was a totally new concept, built on that finest quality of humanity, and that there was equality of races. Think about that, 1953, when no one was talking about it. So we have the most wonderful opportunity to bring about change, and our change is happening, and it's happening now. The last 2 years, I think, has demonstrated to us all why our Commonwealth is so necessary. More than 1 million of our brothers and sisters across the Commonwealth died of COVID-19. There is not one of us, I should imagine, in this room who has not got a family member, a friend, a colleague who they desperately miss as a result of this COVID-19. But how did we respond? We responded by coming together as a family. I will never forget the way in which Commonwealth nurses, Commonwealth doctors, Commonwealth pharmacists, Commonwealth lawyers came together, giving their time, their effort, their passion freely to make it better for all of us. And when I called on Commonwealth civil society, all of you stood up. All of you gave of your best. All of you brought courage and determination and warmth and love to the marketplace. So over the last 2 years, if anything has happened, we have discovered again who we are and why we have come together. The human and social and economic cost of this pandemic has been experienced as a profound dislocation of our lives and our livelihoods and our societies. When we are separated, when we are divided, we are weakened. And when we are together, when we are unified, that's when we are really strong. And I believe profoundly that the Commonwealth is a place where people come together and where nobody is left behind. And we are working, all of us together, tirelessly through our leadership on the world stage, our policy development, and our technical assistance. When I came in 2016, I said that I was absolutely determined to put the wealth back into Commonwealth. But I also said I wanted to put the common back into wealth. We have to leave no one behind. And if you look at what we've done together in relation to climate change, which poses a real existential threat, it is the Commonwealth's voice that has been raised. When we look at what we're doing on women and the issue of domestic violence, we have come together and created the Commonwealth Says No More. And we have been able to bind all our civil society groups, our individuals, our philanthropists, our businesses, and our governments to make the difference that we need to make sure that that figure of 1 in 3 women in our world being subject to domestic violence is history, and we are determined together to make it history. But look what we've done with the Blue Charter. We know that our oceans were being saturated, and people told us that it cannot be done. You can't come to an agreement on Blue Charter. It will take you 10 years. It took our Commonwealth family less than 10 months to come up with the Blue Charter. And what has happened? We listened to the people. We listened when they said, our lives, our livelihoods are being blighted. Our islands are disappearing. We listened and we came up with solutions. And that Blue Charter has already made an appreciable difference. At this CHOGM, we're going to do the same for land, because we've got the call for living lands. We've listened to what the people on the ground were telling us, and we've converted what we've heard into action. It's what we're doing on business. Most of our countries have micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, predominantly women and young people. But they need help, they need money, they need support. And so what are we doing there? We're looking at the digital divide, because the new divide in our Commonwealth is going to be those who are digitalized and those who are not. And we're reaching out to everyone in civil society, including the businesses, and we're saying, how can you help us? Many of you may have noted that Intel has just agreed to give me, on behalf of the Commonwealth, 10,000 places on their training course in order to teach or train the trainers to do AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Millions of pounds coming to our Commonwealth to help us make the difference. But we need to do more and more and more, not just on business, but what about our children? Because we need to give them a world worth living in. And so what we're doing to enable them not just to be on the menu, but to be at the table. And that change started here with civil society groups raising their voices and saying, listen to me, but hear me, and then do something about it. So I hope that what you have seen in the last 6 years is really a very dramatic change. We've gone from policy to action. I've now signed a memorandum of understanding with almost every multilateral organization in the UN system and in the global system. And why are we doing that? It's not a MOU to sign a piece of paper. It's got an action plan against and behind each of it. And if you look at the people on this platform, we're working with all of us, all the organizations working together. And that makes me feel incredibly, incredibly happy, because this Commonwealth will be what we together make it. And I know that we can. And over the last 6 years, we've been able to work with all the accredited organizations, and we're working for a vibrant, thriving democracy where all the people can participate fully. And we're working for prosperous economies in which all people can share. And we're driving the connectivity agenda, and we're using that platform to be the difference we need to make in the world. And the most important reason why I wanted to come is actually to say a profound thank you. Thank you to the whole of civil society. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your courage and your determination. Because over the last 2 years, we've never needed it more. And this close alignment between us is going to continue. So I'm looking at all the faces here present, Stephen, Twig, but I mean, I better not name you all, because I think I could go down every row. So everyone here, I hope you will feel my thanks, because I'm not just thanking you on my behalf. I'm thanking you on behalf of the 2.5 billion people who are relying on us to be the difference we need to make. And I want to say what I've said to many of you before. Thank you for now, but thank you for all the days when you think no one's looking and you'd like to give up. Thank you for the hard times. And when it is really hard, I hope you will know that the Secretary General said thank you in advance. And it's always dangerous when someone does that, because you know there's a lot of work coming your way. So God bless. I'm looking at you, and I know that we've got a long journey yet to go, and I hope you'll forgive me by saying me being able to say a particularly warm thank you to the lawyers, because they say when democracy is in trouble, you shoot all the lawyers first, because we're the ones who always say, I don't think that's quite fair. So will you permit me to say a warm thank you to all the lawyers for standing beside us, standing up for our democracy, not being silent, and a particularly warm thank you for the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists, without whom most of us wouldn't be here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very, very much. We're now going to turn the lens to Your Excellency Vasudevan for your thoughts. You've heard the Secretary General. Give us your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you, Secretary General, for that very comprehensive and very intense welcome that you have given to the civil societies and the relationship that the Commonwealth has with civil society organizations. And as you can see, the 90 overlaid interconnected accreditation organizations are present here. They have taken active participation in the forum and also have taken a lead in the delegation-led sessions. It is very clear that the Commonwealth has indeed done much to reinforce the people side of its identity. And we're talking about an organization that operates, thinks, feels, and is also perceived differently to other intergovernmental bodies. And we have much to be proud of with regard to the Commonwealth civil society relations, which has been expanded by the Secretary General just now. It's not only contained in the Charter. We have come together in the crisis of the COVID. The consultative process has been long. The Commonwealth has had the foresight to actually establish the foundation as one of the pillars, of the three pillars of the Commonwealth. But while having said that, I think much more can be done so that the Commonwealth can live up to its self-processed ideals. The short video that we saw just now only gave us a glimpse into the hunger among the Commonwealth citizens, calling out for a braver, more consistently principled, and more effective organization. And this cannot be done alone. It is an organization led by the governments, but civil society has a big role to play in that process. Bringing the voice of the civil society into more Commonwealth spaces would be an important step forward. It is wonderful we have this opportunity of the People's Forum at CHOGM, and also the course of the dialogue with the foreign ministers, which is going to happen this Saturday. But I feel that there are other Commonwealth spaces, especially the ministerial forums, processes, for example, that would benefit from a more structured civil society involvement. And the strong relationship that has been established between the foundation and the Secretariat, through collaborative efforts, has also been able to bring civil society perspective into the work of the Commonwealth. We all know that much more needs to be done. As I said, it must be a collective effort. We all have a stake in a more representative and more effective Commonwealth. I'll leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Dr. Yu, always smiling. Tell us, what are your thoughts?
I know, I'm clearly in the wrong profession. They say economics is the dismal science. I'm in the wrong profession. I think it's been absolutely, it's been brilliant to be here. I've soaked in everything that I've just heard, and that video. And you know, so just a few thoughts from me. And I think the best part about this forum has been hearing from all of you. So I'm going to just pick out a couple of thoughts that I had. I actually have three thoughts. The first thought is, continue to challenge the Commonwealth. Organizations, if you're not moving ahead, you have actually fallen behind because you're standing still while others are moving ahead. So renewal of organizations, that's how institutions improve. And they only improve if you challenge, if you bring the perspective that all of you from your countries as the people of the Commonwealth, of civil society organizations, what you experience, that's how the organization grows, because you're most aware of your shared challenges. And to me, that's probably the first takeaway that I would have. Yes, in order to maintain the value and the values of the Commonwealth, it requires constant challenge and engagement. And so having this kind of forum is absolutely fantastic. I think the second point I wanted to highlight, and actually builds on something the SG said around the Blue Charter, which is, what is the impact of the Commonwealth? So, because of the nature, and she gave some really important statistics around small states and small developing states, climate change is huge for these countries. It's huge for all of us, but it's particularly pertinent for these countries. It's hard to have a voice as a small state on a global stage. So can the Commonwealth take that collective action in order to create something like the Blue Charter? I'm looking forward to the land one as well, so that collectively there is an impact on the global stage. If the Commonwealth speaks for 1/3 of the world's population and says, this is important, then other countries will pay attention. That's so important for global public goods, like the environment, like health. And the civil society role here is also crucial because, you know, and I'm thinking about, sorry, I've been reading a lot of business books. What is the USP of the Commonwealth? What is the unique selling point? It is in the Charter, we the people of the Commonwealth. So the USP of the Commonwealth is that it's not just government to government or intergovernmental, it's people to people links. And I feel extremely privileged to be the chair of the oldest civil society organization in the Commonwealth, the Royal Commonwealth Society, where I have seen our young leaders across the Commonwealth, our branches, over 60 countries of the Commonwealth and friends of the Commonwealth come together to deliver something which is also geared at raising the importance of forestry, another crucial part of the environment, the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy. So we were the partners with other civil society organizations to deliver getting Commonwealth countries to protect forests in the Queen's name in perpetuity. That's the collective action. That's the impact. That's civil society, and that's the governments working in tandem towards having a much bigger voice on these global issues. And then just finally, it's forums like this, and it's the work that the society does, which is about convening. So I think we've all felt it, you know, we speak to each other, governments speak to each other, and we all need to come together. And the society is very keen, and has done for a very long time, convened, brought young change makers to speak with policymakers, because nobody has all the answers. Policymakers will say, yes, oh, by the way, this is the academic in me, the more you know, the less you know. Nobody has all the answers. And so you need to get wisdom and insight and experience and learning from everywhere. And that's where democracy really works, because it's about bringing that participation, echoing back to a theme that we've had today. And the solutions, and this is definitely the economist in me now coming up, you need a strategy, you need to implement it, but oftentimes it just doesn't work because, I'll give a quick example. So the World Bank gave a lot of computers to a school and then couldn't work out why it didn't work. It turned out they didn't have electricity. So should have given them mobile phones. But my point is, it's always the solutions, the organic ones from the ground up. That's how you adapt, that's how you tailor. That's how change policy really takes hold. That's why this forum is important. Thank you, Anne. That's why I'm very proud of the work the society does, and that to me is the USP of the Commonwealth. People to people, collective impact, and speak for those whose voice is less, because we're diverse and we're inclusive. So thank you. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to add to the SGs. Thank you in advance. There's a lot of work more to do.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. Thank you, Dr. Yu. Secretary General, it's a joy and a pleasure to have you here. We're all blessed with your presence. We understand that you are busy. But do you have anything to just respond to in this moment?
I think to say how we need not to give up. We need to raise our voices. And even when people tell us to be silent, we need not to be. Because we need to hear from everyone. And if we're not hearing from everyone, if we're not hearing from them loudly, then we won't change. And I really want to say to everyone, we are at code red when it comes to climate change. We're at code red when it comes to delivering the SDGs. But we are code green when it comes to passion, when it comes to skill, when it comes to determination. We are also 1/3 of the world. So we shouldn't fool ourselves. This is about making a choice. We can choose to work together. We can choose to plot and plan and share. We can choose to swim together, or we can choose to drown separately. I'm certainly for swimming, and I hope you will swim with me. I want to leave you with the thought, we can do this. Doing nothing is also a choice which has consequences. And so what I'm going to leave you with is a plea. Please choose to join hands. Please choose to be the difference. Please believe you have the courage, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the will to make this world shake. So shake it. And I'll be there clapping you all the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Secretary General.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And I believe on that earth-shattering note, it's good to continue the conversation. I want to go to Alicia just to get your reaction to the video, the comments that have been made so far by Dr. Yu and Sudha as well, and where you see this playing into the future of the Commonwealth, because you essentially represent that.
I found the video quite interesting and exciting because it's always great to hear people. Mike. We're good? Yes. All right. It's always great to hear people being critical of something because we know that nothing is perfect. We've never quite arrived. We're never at that future that we've envisioned. And it can be difficult to do in spaces that feel very formal, or you feel like you're a guest. And it's great to see through that video that even in spaces that are Commonwealth spaces created by Commonwealth institutions, members, civil society feel comfortable to say, we're not quite there yet. There are some things that we still need to do. We saw in the video that some people were saying we need to address the past. It's not something that we can just move on from. There are some things that we need to do to get to the future that we're creating, and a part of that is addressing the past. I think what we've seen too throughout these 2 days here at the People's Forum is that one of our greatest challenges is actually getting outside of the reality that we're living in right now. It's very difficult to see where we can go when we're constantly struggling through the day-to-day things and thinking about, the laws that don't work for us, the policies that we still need. But when we're thinking in that way, we're still stuck in the present, and it doesn't give us the room to think about what could be. So we do have to create some spaces for imagination, and I think that might be the thing that's missing from all of our meetings and convenings and the way that we are thinking. We're not really thinking outside of the box just yet, and we need to get to that point where we're actually making good use of the potential that we're constantly talking about. So we can talk about the number of countries and the diversity in those countries, the number of people that make up the Commonwealth, the passion that we all have, the skills that we have, and how we can put them all together. But none of that potential means anything until we actually put it to good use. We have to actualize. We have to envision that future together. We have to co-create it, and that means actually doing something and making use of the resources that we do have. And we also have to think more about the way that we place the burden of responsibility, recognizing that civil society is important. We do have an important role to play, but we also have to look to the institutions that have and hold a lot of the resources that we need and think about how we can redistribute power.
Fantastic. I'd like to get Justin's take as well as we move on to Ineza.
Thank you very much. And I think the first thing I would say is what a rare delight it is to be the only male on a panel of these extraordinary women speakers. And to Anne and the Commonwealth Foundation, I think the only thing you could have done better is to replace me with another female, but thank you. I know we have a discussion in a few minutes about the Charter, but as it was prominent in the video and as the Secretary General spoke so freely about it, let me do the same. And I agree with the Secretary General. I think it's a wonderful Charter. And then I think about what it means to me and to people like me. I'm an LGBT person. The people that and communities that my organisation support back home in Australia are LGBT, sexuality and gender diverse. And these people have difficult lives, even in a country like Australia where things have moved quite far. And then I read the Charter, and it says we are implacably opposed to all forms of discrimination, whether rooted in gender, race, colour, creed, political belief, or other grounds. And we are not. In 35 Commonwealth countries, my love is illegal. In more than a handful of these countries, it's punishable by a very lengthy jail term. In a couple of countries, it's punishable by death. We are not opposed to all forms of discrimination. And this Charter is not a document dreamed up by civil society advocates like me. It's a Charter agreed to by our heads of state and signed personally by Her Majesty the Queen. So my response to this video is, what are we going to do to turn these fine words into fine actions? And I completely understand that there are cultural sensitivities and that these conversations need to be had constructively. And I completely understand that this is not the place for people from the global north to be telling people from other parts of the world what to do, and this point was made so clearly by Dr. Saeed earlier today. And I thank Jimmy Fletcher for calling out my own government, the Government of Australia, for its bad behaviour on climate change. Jimmy, will you dance with me? This has to be both ways, multiple directions. But unless we can have the hard conversations and unless we can give this charter some teeth, I fear we will be struggling.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin, for your candor and raising a very pertinent issue in regards to the Commonwealth and that inclusion that is so necessary. Ineza, let me bring you in here just to get your reaction to the video and just your thoughts on what a Commonwealth for all would look like.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the space. It's really hard to find why would be the interest, because my colleagues have been saying most of the things that I was wishing to say, but I hope I'm not going to be repeating myself. So for me, as an ecofeminist, impact-driven actor in the climate change sector, I resonate with most of what the video is having, especially three key messages. So first, for me, I believe that the Commonwealth exists to reshape our generation and the next generation without ignoring the value of its history. We cannot build a Commonwealth solidarity if we fail to understand the roots of its existence. We need to say yes to a new normal and allow the Commonwealth community to reshape the reality, but especially involving young people. I know it sounds cliche, as youth have been demanding to have a space, which we do, but there's a need to deploy and invest the right tool for the youth to be able to lead and pave the way toward the global solidarity today. Second, the Commonwealth should be a vehicle to advocate for the need of people-driven action by putting people at the center. Yesterday, I attended a session where one of the speakers mentioned that Commonwealth should be renamed Common Planet. And I thought what makes most sense is maybe also to rename it Common People, because that would be a way to do justice of what we want to do, which is to bring local actors, community, women, youth, and children, and marginalized community to feel and be able to be active stakeholders in driving the change we all want to see by really leaving no one behind. This will allow the conversation to reach the local community by also offering leaders to have a safe space to know actively how to address the concern of the community on the ground. Last but not least, we need action. And allow me to say we need climate action. We need to move things up. The frustration is real in the international process. For ages, we have been promised, we have written promises on the black and white paper, and we have limited action on the ground to take things forward. For me, I believe that there's no need to revert the wheel, because we do have actors, researchers, businesses, institutions, youth, women, marginalized community who are doing concrete action in their community. What is needed is to join hands to amplify their impact by allowing them to overcome the challenges that only the international community can resolve. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to Ineza and our other panelists for your reactions. I think at this point we'd want to open up to our delegates just to get questions and also your reactions to this as well. As Ineza said, the charter can be limited to black and white words on a piece of paper. We can't. We have to actually see it become real for the 2.5 billion citizens of the Commonwealth. So if we have any questions, Mark and I will be going around the room. Okay.
We are also going to try and see if we can get people who haven't had a voice.
That's right, new voices.
Over the past couple of days. I love your voice, though. It is lovely.
So let me come here.
Good afternoon. My name is Heidi Chow. I'm the Executive Director of an organisation called Debt Justice, based in the UK. My question really is around the subject of colonialism, which I think is the elephant in the room. I think it was mentioned on the video about the Commonwealth needing to be able to come to terms with its past, but also to make reparations for its past. In particular, I feel like the Commonwealth has emerged from colonialism. That's its history, that's its roots. And I'm afraid that colonialism hasn't been consigned to the past because we continue to see neo-colonialism, and especially with countries like the UK government that have been perpetuating neo-colonialism in spaces like the World Trade Organization, for example, where last week it scuppered a plan to proposed by South Africa and India to waive the intellectual property rules to open up access to COVID-19 health technologies like vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics. This would have made a massive difference in terms of building equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines in a time of crisis. And yet at that very point, like I said, the UK has played a really destructive role. The UK's role in COP, as well as other high-income countries in the Commonwealth, Australia and Canada, have been putting their fingers in their ears as well for demands for climate finance in the form of grants and not loans, as well as the demands that are coming loud and clear from the Global South, from countries that are vulnerable to the climate vulnerable countries and the small island states for a fund for loss and damage. And so I guess my question is really, how can we use the leverage of the Commonwealth to force high-income countries within the Commonwealth to take responsibility for their role in historic colonialism, but also in its current role in neo-colonialism? Thank you.
Mark, do you have anyone on your end?
No. She became a little shy.
Okay, let me come to this gentleman right here.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Koh from Malaysia. This is my first experience with Commonwealth People's Forum. You know, there are a lot of skeptics out there who feel that this forum is, you know, on a certain level and not at the people's level. And whatever has been said will be just words on paper, like what has been mentioned earlier. And after being with you all for 2 days, I'm optimistic that these words will not remain just on paper, but will be words which will be acted upon. And that's my comment. Thank you for these past 2 days.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. I'm Salil Tripathi. I'm a trustee at the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and I want to thank Dr. Justin Kunin for what he said about LGBT rights, where he did speak and he did mention the Charter, where the words are not mentioned as sexual orientation but as other grounds. We have, as he pointed out quite rightly, many countries within the Commonwealth which have discriminatory laws and even to some extent criminalization. In that kind of a context, what can be done so that these laws ultimately, Human Rights Watch had a great report some years ago which basically showed that the LGBT laws that we have around the world is a colonial and a Commonwealth or British Empire's legacy. Britain has moved on, Australia, all those countries have changed, but these countries aren't. And this is not specific just to LGBT rights. It applies to defamation laws, it applies to sedition laws, it applies to Official Secrets Acts and other laws like that. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But specifically on LGBT rights, the discrimination is there, criminalization is there, slow steps are being made as in India, but what more can be done at the Commonwealth level to fix the system? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I've worked some magic.
So I've just come from the Commonwealth Youth Forum yesterday, and it was amazing to see how everybody was working together towards our future. And I also wanted to highlight the importance of giving voice to Indigenous peoples. So my father is Maasai, and maybe you know, but maybe you don't, but at the moment in the news, hundreds of thousands of Maasai people are being evicted of their land. So I just wanted to say the importance of being aware of Indigenous voices and their roles in providing their wealth when it comes to the environment, and the knowledge that they have is valuable to the future and the present.
So I think at this point, we should actually move to field the questions to our panelists. In the interest of time, we'll come back to our delegates. And there were several concerns, one on using the leverage of the Commonwealth to challenge the non-action of big players. Looking also at the laws on LGBT and the fact that they also play to the legacy of the colonial past, and how do we use the Commonwealth to challenge some of those repressive laws, and then looking at the welfare of Indigenous groups. So I'll just leave it open to the panelists to see which you are comfortable to respond to.
I think those were really great questions that we won't be able to really address or answer unless we are prepared to talk about reparations. And it seems to be something that people shy away from. I know the question came up, I think, yesterday, and someone sort of swerved around it, but what was described was actually reparations. So one place to look to start is the CARICOM 10-point reparations plan, where number one, the first ask is an apology. Because once you apologize, you acknowledge that something's been done wrong, and once you acknowledge that you've done something wrong, you need to make repair. And one of the areas that we definitely need to make repair is in these repressive, discriminatory, harmful, violent laws that we've been stuck with because of colonialism. And it's really difficult in smaller countries, countries with less resources, but also countries that are still really mired in colonialism and forms of neocolonialism, to do it for ourselves. We need technical expertise. We need to figure out how we can actually advocate, how to engage people, to mobilize people on the ground, educate them about even the humanity of LGBTQI plus people, because it seems as though, you know, we get treated as though we're some special category of a lower level of human beings. So there's a lot of work to do. There's social work, there's cultural work in many places. There is work to be done with faith-based organizations. And there are countries that have been successful or have had varying levels of success. And we keep saying that one of the unique and really special things about the Commonwealth is that we have so many different countries with so many different experiences at different levels of moving forward, different levels of development, if we want to use that word. So we need to create spaces for peer learning, but also we can look to Commonwealth institutions to provide technical assistance to get some of this work done. And we have seen that in recent years with the formation of the Equality and Justice Alliance, which ran for a couple of years with 4 organizations. They were the Royal Commonwealth Society, Human Dignity Trust, Sisters for Change, and Kaleidoscope Trust. So actually providing education, bringing people together, having convenings like this one at the high level, bringing ministers together to learn about laws and how they can actually create that change. These are the kinds of things that we should be doing, and these are forms of reparations, with Britain recognizing that, hey, we are responsible for this, and we're also responsible for fixing it. We can't just say, we've changed our mind, we've changed our laws, here's a charter, do it yourself. We actually have to provide the resources for people to do that.
I guess maybe we'll go down the line. I'll hold off suggestions around what the Commonwealth can do, because I know we have a discussion about the Charter itself in some more detail in a minute, and I make some comments there. But in terms of these other issues around LGBT rights, around Indigenous rights and recognition, perhaps the one suggestion I would have is listen to the young people. We've been saying that for 2 days of this forum. Ask the young people what they think about LGBT rights. Ask the young people what they think about how Indigenous people should be recognised. They have the answers, and I think if the Commonwealth can listen to the young people, we can be a vibrant organisation. If we remain rooted in the past, we run the risk of obsolescence.
I'll just build quickly on that, and thank you, Alicia. Yes, the Equality and Justice Alliance, I thought, was something the society was absolutely pleased to convene to really, I think, really start the conversation about how you deal with the legacies of colonialism, and to bring the technical resources and the social change to try and change laws which still remain on the books. And I think, you know, if you don't know the lessons of history, you're doomed to repeat its worst mistakes. So I think a conversation at the Commonwealth level does need to be had about colonialism and about the changes that are needed and what's needed. And I think one of the things the society really does is convene young people like Alicia, because I think this is where you can move, acknowledge where you can learn the lessons, try to affect change, and move it forward. Because you're right, otherwise the organization, it will become obsolete. So thank you.
Thank you. I totally agree with all the speakers before me. All I can say is that these are hard conversations, and I think these hard conversations have to start, have to continue. Some have already started, and I think we shouldn't give up. I think it's for us to stir things up so that you have the governments, the ministers, the heads of state. They will put some thought into how we could actually progress on the various issues that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add on the first question. I do agree with all the answer that was said. I just have on the climate side, on how the colonialism is being also in a climate change space. I do believe that the Commonwealth Charter is an important tool because it has diplomacy, justice, the recognition of vulnerable state, the least developed country, small island, the young people. So technically it should be a guiding tool to allow us to speak the truth and allow us to really shape the right narration of what is the injustice on our current state. Because what is happening, yes, we know where the blame should be, but we should not be blaming. We should be able to amplify the voices, but at the same time work together. But recognizing that, yes, we are all on the same boat, but we're not coming from the same point. And be able to recognize that, especially in the climate justice sector, because that's one sector that is jeopardizing a lot of the economic development of most of the country in the Commonwealth. Because if you look clearly, erosion, flooding, a cyclone, they all wash away development of countries that took very much years to develop, but they all washed out and they don't have the right tools to really make the demands in the global process. So what we need is to really speak the truth and don't be afraid, because I feel we have the right tools. It's simply being able to how to use it.
Wonderful. I think on that note, it would be great to move into looking at the Commonwealth Charter itself. And just a prompt to the tech team, I believe we do have some reactions from those who are joining us online. It'd be good to get their conversations and comments and reactions on the screen at some point. But let me field this to the panel. In terms of the Charter as it stands, is it still relevant? And is there need to change it, and where and why? Alicia, I'll start with you.
The charter is definitely still relevant. We're still not where we need to be. I find that the language in the charter is quite general, and that might be intentional, particularly where the Commonwealth is a consensus space. So watering down is bound to happen. But the issue that I see with the charter as it is now is that it's ideas. So you'll see that in all of those sections, I think it's 16 core values and principles. They all start with, we recognize that, we commit to, we believe in, and my question is, so what? We recognize these things, what are we going to do about them? We have in the charter, among the principles, democracy and human rights, which are sort of obvious and we can generally agree on them. We have some buzzwords like good governance and sustainability, great. The ones that are more interesting to me include recognition of the needs of small states and recognition of the needs of vulnerable states. And again, the language there is sort of, this is the situation in these states. And again, so what? So my question, I think we have to build on that charter. What does the charter mean for us? What does it demand that states do? Great, you recognize that we have some challenges and there are some goals that we need to reach. How are we going to get there? With what resources? Who is going to drive it? There are a lot of questions for me that come out of the charter, and I talked earlier about reparations and looking at what we need to do about the situation of people who are descendants of people who were enslaved. What are we going to do about climate? Recognizing that, as we talked about yesterday, countries that are not contributing to this issue are the ones that are getting the brunt of it, and then being told that they need to borrow money from the countries that are responsible. This is a form of reparations that we need to have. And all of this is coming from the charter, but it's not laid out in there. So I think our next step isn't to create something new or to throw the charter in the trash, but to figure out what is the map that we are creating stemming from these 16 core values that everyone has already agreed to. Where do we go from here? How do we ensure that we actualize, that we turn this into action, and we're actually able to make some movement from where we are now to where we know we need to be?
Fantastic. Let me pivot a bit and just to get the panel's reaction to this question on how the Commonwealth Foundation can play a role in facilitating civil society, and this is with the view of strengthening the Charter. So Justin, I'll come to you and then Dr. Yu.
I actually think the Charter is pretty good. With Alicia, I do think that there could be strengthening to the language. It's general in the ways that we tend to get lowest common denominators on these things. But what can the Commonwealth Foundation do? Well, I mean, convening meetings like this is a wonderful start. I think the Commonwealth Foundation is doing what it can be doing. I don't know that I have anything specific. I think the issues with the Charter are really at a higher level. And again, like Alicia said, it's not the words in the document, it's that the Charter has no teeth. So what use is strengthening the language in a Charter if governments and countries can go off and do what they want anyway? And there, I think there are suggestions, because when the Eminent Persons Group proposed this Charter in 2011, it also came with other recommendations, and many in the room would know this far better than me, around a commissioner looking at human rights, and around an expanded remit for CMAG, the Commonwealth Ministerial Advisory Group, to look not just at egregious cases of unconstitutional governments, as they have been, but a far broader look at instances where the values contained within the Charter have been violated. And I dare say there's probably not a country among us which hasn't violated some of them at some point. So I'm sorry that is not to answer your question, but I actually think the Commonwealth Foundation is doing a really good job. And yes, the language could be strengthened, but that's not the problem.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that in terms of the teeth? What teeth can we add to the Charter, in your view?
It's not the Charter. You don't need to change the words of the Charter. It would be nice, but that's not what the problem is. What we need to do is follow the recommendations of the Eminent Persons Group in 2011. Expands the ambit of CMAG so that where there are violations of this Charter, we can hold countries to account for that and potentially consider this issue of a commissioner.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Yu, your view?
Yeah, so I think of, sorry for the business lingo. What are the KPIs? What key performance indicators? So you say you respect human rights. Where's the evidence of that? You know, what can you point to? So, you know, words on a page gives you the kind of, you know, that's the principle, those are the values. But to be effective in terms of values, it's about what you deliver against to show that you embody those values. So that very much echoes what Alicia and Justin have said. It's around, and also Anisa, it's around actions, right? So if you say you espouse these values, what are you doing to show that? Can we judge you against that? Because that's what we, the people, should be doing. And that's the only way to make the values come alive and for the principles to be effective in affecting people's everyday lives. And I suppose the one thing that I would stress is, so it's a living document. It was put together. It can be revised. Thinking about the US constitutional amendments, it is possible to revise it to be more up to date if there are values which need strengthening, LGBTQ, climate. It's absolute, but to me, those are how you keep the document relevant. But importantly, I would say, let's think about KPIs, how we hold our governments in the Commonwealth to account for delivering against those values, and judge them against whether or not it's people-led. Because we take seriously the start of the document, we the people of the Commonwealth, in which case, are the policies people-centric, people-led? Do they think about including the most vulnerable in society? And I think, to me, that's how we make the next phase of the Charter relevant to our lives. And I agree about the foundation. This is exactly where these conversations should be held. So well done, Anne.
Madam Chair Suda.
Thank you. I think that the first step towards change comes from self-reflection and the realization for the need for reform. And I think the Commonwealth has not been alien to that. It has seen the need for reform, but sometimes you know you need to reform, but how much and how you do it is the challenge. And it is not easy with such a diverse grouping as the Commonwealth. But the initial push that took place for reform resulted in the Eminent Persons Report in 2012, which the Foundation had a critical conversation about. in celebrating or in commemorating its 10 years this year. And you find that the Eminent Persons Report, which Justin spoke about also, has 106 recommendations, and the adoption of the Charter was only one of them. So perhaps we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I agree with Justin, we can go back to the Eminent Persons Report and see what else can be implemented. Some might be time sensitive, it might be outdated, but I think there are many ideas and proposals in there that can be implemented if you have the political will to do so. And next year would be the 10th anniversary of the Charter. So that gives us a good opportunity to also talk about the Charter and ask the hard questions, questions that we are asking now and trying to answer. And I think everyone should take this opportunity to do so. The foundation would play its role for what it has been established. It will provide the platform for discussions, and it will also play the role of the interlocutor between government and society. So your ideas through this platform, ideas and your voice, so we will play the role of bridging and getting these ideas to the center of discussion. I think that's what the foundation can do. And I hope that you all will actively participate in giving your views to the Charter discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, and finish off with Ineza before we move to the delegates.
Thank you so much. I feel like I should add a few points because I felt my colleagues really added a good point, but I just want to say the Charter is a good foundation for what we want to see in the future, but it shouldn't be a siloed document. So if next year, I was thinking if next year is going to be the anniversary, what if civil society is allowed to have a platform to analyze each of the value of the Charter among all the international process that all our country belongs into, so that we can have a clear standing evaluation of how the Charter is looking for our people, but also for the future generation, with giving us clear, concrete action, because we need to move from promises to action on what things should be done. So that would be something I can add on. Thank you.
Wonderful, Mark. So if we can open up to the last session to get questions from our delegates.
Yes. There was a gentleman back here, I'm coming to you, Jimmy, who was in need of a question.
All right, I think I'm at my person faster.
Oh, did you get to yours?
Go
faster?
ahead, he's standing.
Thank you very much, moderator and gentlemen. I'm Eric Ndushavandi. I'm the director of an institute called the Institute Research and Dialogue for Peace, which is an independent think tank and a peace building organization. And I'm professor of political science at the University of Rwanda. I could say I hesitated to take my question out when I heard Ineza talking. I could love to have many Inezas in this country. I will apologize. I'm standing not legitimate because I've never had the chance to read the Charter. I've never read it. And I hope I'm not the only one here. And I guess. But I promise I will read it now. As having a chance to be in academic and in civil society organizations, I'm having two questions, and I can have this from countries who have been members of the Commonwealth. We have never talked about education. Education systems. I think education systems, we are talking about decolonizing or popularizing, localizing. I think the main place you have to popularize this Charter is in our education system. Guys, who can share with us how it works concretely in schools to make sure that these values, principles are infused in our programs? Second is to see from civil society organizations, we are talking about humanity. It's very good. People-led. So my point is, what kind of methods, who can share with us? What approaches to be used? And I guess those approaches might be very friendly to ordinary people, to our kids, cartoon, to really to have new generations and having many erasers in this country and in many other countries, Commonwealth member states. So my point is, in education systems, who can share with us experiences, how this can be included in our curriculum? Then the point is the revision. The revision have been touched on right now. I think the revision in bracket could be at the level of the way our nations are localizing this charter, owned by ordinary people, and by the way informed by our cultures and the values. Then you can make sure that we have sustainability and owned by ordinary people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Pauline Irungu. I come from Kenya. I work for an organization called PATH, but I'm here representing CSM for UHC. Mike, I've been sitting here, and one question that's really been bothering me is, does the Commonwealth have a peer accountability mechanism or commission that links with what Dr. Yu said? That where are the key performance indicators? A lot of us in civil society, we're funded. And when you implement your projects, you have to hit targets. What targets are governments hitting? In terms of human rights, in terms of implementing national development blueprints, in terms of treating people right, achieving for humanity development. And I'm thinking about it in three pieces. One, there are those countries that write policies that they have no intent to implement for their people. There are those powerful countries that are sitting in global bodies like G7, G20, that push agenda that doesn't help the rest of the Commonwealth develop. And then there's just blatant violation of rights. What can the Commonwealth do collectively, as well as through its institutions, to give life to the principles? When I've read those principles, I look at them and I ask myself, do I belong to the Commonwealth, really?
Thank you, Pauline. We have a hand up there. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
I go ahead. Thank you very much. I'm Rose Gahile. I belong to so many organizations. One is an organization fighting for the welfare of older people in Rwanda. Secondly, I belong also to people living with non-communicable diseases, Rwanda NCD Alliance. My question is, I've been hearing all discussants and presenters and everybody. I never heard anybody saying about the voice of old person in the Commonwealth. Even the charter, I didn't see it. So I'm wondering, we've been advocating at the UN level. It's called the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. And we are advocating for the Old People Convention. We have that one for the children, we have one for the disability, we have one for the women. But then I'm wondering, what's wrong with 54 countries? I was there in New York, but I never saw all the 50 countries of the Commonwealth. Nobody talks about the old person. And it's where we're going. So whether you say it today or tomorrow, we are all reaching there. So where the voice of that person, even this charter, I didn't see it. So it's good that it's celebrating 10 years next year. Maybe we can revise it as Dr. Rick said, and we'll put it according to people's wishes, and people, look at how it can work for everybody. We are here now in the Commonwealth Forum. So where are the voices of all the people? Again, where are the voices of people living with non-communicable diseases? I didn't see it here. And you all have it. We are all moving with it. Most of us, if I bring a BP machine or whatever, I could see so many people who are having it. So when you are revising this document, let's think of those two groups and let them have their voices in the Commonwealth. Let's call the 54 countries to sit on the table, and then we'll get involvement of people, of all the people, and then of people living with non-communicable diseases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a gentleman right in the back of the room.
Thank you so much. I'm Andrew Kavala from Malawi. I sit in the board of Commonwealth Foundation on Aging. The conversation is good. Our planet, climate change, indigenous people, indigenous knowledge. I have two questions, or rather challenge the Commonwealth. What can we do? First of all, I want to compliment my colleague who just sat down. Older men and older women constitute the most at-risk group when it comes to climate change. The cyclone Idai, which hit Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Mozambique, when you look at the figures, 60% of those who were affected were older men and older women. The recent floods in Durban, the same thing. And when you go back in 2011, the Japanese tsunami, 56% of those who died were 60 years and above. I would want to challenge the Commonwealth. What are we doing to ensure that our policies on climate change are meant to protect the vulnerability that older men and older women are facing in our countries? And secondly, on indigenous knowledge, I'm of the view that yes, technology is very good. It's good that we move with technology all the time. But older men and older women across the countries have very rich indigenous knowledge. What are we doing to ensure that there is value addition to their indigenous knowledge? I would give you an example. Say in Malawi, there are sometimes older men and older women who would identify some specific birds and would say this year is going to flood. Oftentimes we would want to gauge based on the technology. We ignore such type of advice, but at the end of the day, indeed things like those happen. What can we do as the Commonwealth to ensure that we encourage the space where technology and indigenous knowledge are speaking to each other for the survival of the universe? Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Madhurima. I work for the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative in the India office. And I had a specific comment and suggestion to make on the point on rule of law that's there in the charter. And very specifically, what exists as of now, it talks about the protections for the people. But it doesn't anywhere talk about the accessibility to rule of law. It doesn't talk about the need for people-centered justice systems either. We're only talking about what systems are need to be there, but it doesn't talk about how to involve people's and people's voices to be part of that. So my suggestion would be to revise and rephrase the rule of law section to make it more talking about accessibility. Even to the good person who spoke before me, he talked about technology and he talked about how that can help and lend the people's voices and help understanding. So it's all about access to justice and accessibility to the justice means. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Eli Mugabawishema. I'm the president of the organization Accordance in Dagiza. I want to commend the focus of the foundation on the youth. What I wanted to ask is how are you going to sustain what we are doing for youth? Because in my understanding is that we should cover the whole life cycle. Because we are all aging. Now, if we focus on youth, what are the strategies to make sure that they age well? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll take one more. I have to see a face I haven't spoken to yet. Yes, sir, you can come to the front. Oh, that is Dr. Fletcher.
That's Jimmy. I mean,
repeat offender. So actually, let's see if we can get a woman in on the mix here.
Okay. So my question is just very quick because Glenn Romery here from Jamaica and with the Commonwealth Equality Network. Because we've talked about giving the charter teeth, and I think about how the provision that speaks to or other grounds prohibiting discrimination and what that meant within the UN system, how protecting discrimination on other grounds led to prohibiting sexual orientation discrimination in Australia. I would love to hear the panel describe a mechanism for the people that the Charter refers to being able to engage and hold governments accountable for human rights violations, as well as failures to do the kind of national development action that they commit to within the Charter. What would that process look like that involves people and civil society?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. My name is Aurora Regine from Rwanda. I work for agriculture-related project. Since yesterday, I've had a lot of discussions around Commonwealth people putting together all people. And my question here is addressed to maybe to Dr. Linda or Dr. Justin. I've heard that all we need is something tangible, a multi-stakeholder partnership that could just create a partnership involving all the stages, government, civil society, vulnerable youth, women, engaging all these in one platform. And my question is then, how can we just initiate such kind of multi-stakeholder partnership? And how can it be effective and customized per each 54 countries of the Commonwealth? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So my name is Ugonna. I'm from the Commonwealth Human Rights Foundation. So I've looked at the charter on the portion that talks about freedom of expression, and it talks about the commitment to free flow of information. But from the work we've done at the Commonwealth Human Rights Foundation, we find that the challenge is necessarily not the free flow of information in itself, but the problem is proactive disclosure. So we have about 34 countries in the Commonwealth that have passed the right information law, but implementation is a major challenge. So is it possible that we can commit ourselves to proactive disclosure, making information available regularly without necessarily requiring citizens to request for that information? So we go to the websites of various institutions, we can actually see that information. So I think that the language in that section should be a bit more stronger to ensure proactivity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, do you have someone on your end?
No, that's it. Oh.
I appear to be partial to this side of the room.
My goodness. There's one here. Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Tandiwe Mfulo. I'm from South Africa. I'm representing Commonwealth people with disability. My question or my comment is around inclusivity. You know, for us as members of Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, we had to challenge organizers, ask why are we not part of the team? And when we become part of the team, when we arrive here, it's People's Forum Commonwealth, which is good. But my question is, who am I talking to? Because I thought that this is Commonwealth on head of government, states. So it means our government must account to us. We also need to account to government. So who are we accounting to? Because here it's People's Forum. It means civil society is talking to themselves. It does not say anything. Government is sitting on their side there. Business is sitting on their side there. I'm a business person. I'm running a business as a disabled person. Now, there are challenges that affect me as a disabled business person. When do I talk to those business people? And I'm also a person in my country. When do I challenge my country to say, you are coming with a report to Commonwealth, but that report, when do we challenge that? Because they will give you a report and say, no, issues of disability in my country, 1, 2, 3, 4 things are going right. Whereas we know that things are not happening. Now, my last other thing is to say, how do we force that account? How do we force them to make sure that they account what they say they've done? They've signed so many, ratification or whatever. But reality is, the implementation side of what they agreed on It's not there. I agree with you when you say the KPIs. Let us see the KPIs, the key performance, areas to say when are they doing that. There's no follow-up. There's no monitoring. So why are we sitting here? If after a year we are coming back and there's nothing that we have monitored, because the role of civil society is to monitor and give guidance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I think it's at that point where we have to come to our panel in the interest of time. Lots and lots of questions. There was one on peer accountability mechanism, the need to localize and contextualize the charter, tapping into indigenous knowledge of the elderly and also coupling that with technology when we're responding to climate change, the rule of law and accessibility, and having people-centered justice systems. And then there was a question to Dr. Yu and Justin on multi-stakeholder partnership. And then, of course, the last one on we're preaching to the converted. How do we have conversations with the leaders and decision makers as we continue with these conversations? So I'll open up to the panel and just have you respond to the questions that you feel fit to respond to. We'll just go down the line. Alicia, please. And please also pull the mic down to, yes, fantastic.
I think we have a lot of comments from people about specific communities, particular groups that aren't named. And I think there's the expectation that they should all be named in the charter in their own value, I think. But in addition to that, I think we need to think about the process that we use to create change, the process of having these conversations and who is actually in the room. Because the people here have a particular privilege, right, of being in this space. And there's a question of what happens when we go back home. Are we going back to write op-eds and letters to the editor and to talk to the press about the conversations that we had here with each other in this space? Because just by being here, we have a responsibility as well to take that information back home and to help to educate people and get them involved as well. But also ensuring that we are starting with the people who are in situations of vulnerability and not starting with the people that we know and that we're sitting around tables with. Because if we leave them behind, then we're not making any progress at all, if we're just making our own lives a little bit more comfortable. So we need to start with women, girls, people with disabilities, indigenous people, people who are migrants, LGBTQI plus people. These are the people that we need to start with. And I think we need to move away from this idea that academics and researchers are the experts and we just bring them in and they tell us what they know. Sure, we have people who are doing their PhDs and they do ethnography and they sit in the community and they learn everything from the people and then somehow they become the expert. We have to realize that people are experts in their own experiences and we need to figure out how we're going to bring them to speak for themselves and to advocate for themselves, because one person, two people, even a group of 5, 10 people cannot do it, especially if you're the people who have the access to this kind of space. And since we're talking about access, also I think we lean a lot on technology to make things accessible, but there are people who do not have access to the internet, who cannot afford these devices. So what are we going to do about ensuring that people who don't have that kind of access still are able to access services, information, resources without having that? And how are we going to bridge that gap in the meantime? But we cannot wait and try to do one at a time. We have to ensure that people have access right now to what they need while we work on getting the digitization where it needs to be, digital transformation.
And Alicia, if you could also add your final ask, and I'll also ask that of the panelists as well.
My final ask for everyone here is to make sure that when you go home, you don't forget about what happened here and you actually take what you've learned, take the ideas that have been shared. And in some cases, we had some sort of half ideas that still need to be developed. Start working on that, the connections that you've made here over these past few days, make sure that you follow up on them, because it's really working together that we actually get things going. And the ask of Commonwealth institutions is to develop a process for us to keep this going. We don't have to wait for every 2 years to do this. So we need to create our own cycle where we have visioning, we can actually create something, we can pilot it, we can evaluate it, and then revise it after that evaluation. And once we get to the point where something's working, actually be able to replicate and scale it so that other countries, other member states can use them.
Fantastic. So responses and final ask from all the panelists.
Thanks. I think there were about 9 questions and 5 of us, so obviously 9 times, we can't do 45 responses, but a couple of I first want to respond to my sister from South Africa. That's actually my secret. I'm Australian, but I was born in South Africa. My mother was very active in the anti-apartheid movement, and I know how important the Commonwealth was in ending apartheid, and I hope we can return to a place where the Commonwealth is active in these key political issues. But you asked the question about bringing stakeholders together. I'm not suggesting this is the way to do it, but the way that we coordinate within the universal health coverage movement, we have a steering committee, and on that steering committee are governments, 9 member states, 3 high income, 3 middle income, 3 low income. We have civil society, we have multilaterals, we have the private sector, and we have philanthropic foundations. And having us all in the same rooms at the same time is tremendously fruitful. And I think these discussions where we have a People's Forum and a Women's Forum and a Youth Forum and a Business Forum, and then we get to speak to government as well on occasion, are incredibly important. They need to happen on their own. We need to figure out what we're doing. But then we also need to find ways for us to join together, and perhaps that is a model for the Commonwealth collectively to think of as we move forwards. The other collective questions, comments I'd like to respond to is, so we had some questions about inclusion of particular populations, of Indigenous people, of people living with a disability, of older people. To all of those, I would say, so often when we talk about inclusion, we see these groups as sort of like problems that need to be solved, and I'd really like us to flip it round. What we should be recognizing are the strength that these communities bring, the wisdom of older people, the wisdom of Indigenous people. You know, in Australia, the Indigenous people are the oldest surviving continuous culture in the world. They've been looking after the land for 60,000 years, and we need to learn from that. The wisdom and the strength that we get from people living with disabilities. So can we please turn this to a strengths-based conversation and recognize that when all of these people are with us, we are stronger.
So I'll pick up 3 points. I think first on the education systems. I'm going to give concrete examples in the interest of time, and hopefully these are examples and programs that you could read a bit more about. In terms of value infusion, so the Royal Commonwealth Society runs the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition, and every year we pick a value. So this year it's service, and we ask young people across the Commonwealth to write an essay on what service means to them. And just by engaging and writing about the values, it makes this impression. And if they win, they get a trip to London as well with their parents and get their award at Buckingham Palace. But that is a way of just concretely making something about values. The second point about, we also run a Commonwealth Youth Exchange. So we help young leaders, Alicia doesn't need it, but develop social action programs, and we pair them with disadvantaged youth in the UK so that it becomes an exchange. And again, it opens your eyes when you travel somewhere and you're able to create a program, challenge each other, and to do some good. And I think that's how we change our worldviews. My second point is around a different charity that I'm a trustee of, Malaria No More. So they created a malaria scorecard to hold the governments to account about their progress against reducing the incidence of malaria. So in terms of peer accountability, that is indeed, I think, the kind of KPIs. I need to think of a more inspirational term than KPI, but that is the KPI you would measure them against. If they say they're going to do this on climate, if they say they're going to do this on malaria, then hold them to account. Are they achieving it? And shed light on it, because transparency and publicity, that's actually where a lot of peer pressure comes from. And how you embed yourselves is actually my sort of third point, and that's my final take as well, which is in another line of, in my day job, I proposed as part of a commission, putting in advisory groups for the UK government when they want to put down a policy on trade. They ought to have a stakeholder group of all the groups that will be affected so that they can have an impact assessment on that policy. It ensures that all the stakeholders feed back into, if you're going to do this policy, this is how it affects us. And if there's a detrimental impact, then you know about it, you can measure it, and you can do something about it. And that's actually the only way to embed this conversation. So that's actually my takeaway. You know, let's not preach to the converted, although it is more fun. You know, but think about, you know, creating within your own communities and within your own countries the kind of stakeholder groups that can really make a difference and put pressure on Commonwealth governments and the Commonwealth itself. And then just finally, The irony about the charter not referring to old people is that the charter was probably written by old people. But I do think that, again, it should be a living document. It should be revised to be more effective. And I guess my second takeaway is pick up a copy of the charter from Anne. And, this is how the conversation gets started. Put in your input and, be the change you want to see. So she's holding it up. So thank you all very much. And, it's absolutely been fantastic. And again, I know we don't want to talk to preaching to the converted, but it really is mutually inspiring. So thank you all for all the work you do.
Thank you. I'll just make some broad observations. I think that the Charter, as it is, provides a broad framework, and it embodies the values and aspirations as we agree. And this is what unites the countries of the Commonwealth, because they've come together to agree to this document. And this document, as a follow-up, provides that umbrella for all other action plans on the various sections that have been mentioned, the broad sections. If the Charter is going to include every aspect, every group, then it will be no different from the communiques. The voluminous communiques, pages and pages of it, and everybody is drowning even reading them. So the Charter as it is short and sweet. It's general enough, but what is most important is that the countries have come together to agree, united in wanting to move forward these principles. So what we have to do now, in joining voices and joining our ideas in putting forward concrete action plans on how this can be moved forward and how we can give life to the Charter. Another round of lofty reform proposals is not going to do it. You have to come up with concrete action plans. That is necessary. And I think it's very true that communiques, there's a wide gap between what is written in a communique after every meeting, ministerial or heads of government, and what actually is implemented after that. There must be the views that there must be a system, a KPI index to hold governments to account for what they have done, for what they have failed to do. But we must remember that there are already several indexes out there. The United Nations has them. The Development Index, the Human Rights Commission has an annual report on how countries have failed or are performing as far as human rights is concerned. I think it doesn't serve the Commonwealth purpose to actually duplicate this. What is necessary is for the Commonwealth to actually use these indexes that are being done by the UN Secretariat and the various other international organizations to use it for our benefit. And I think civil society can use that as benchmark and hold governments to account for this. And I think, being the chair of the foundation, I can only implore you all to be active, be part of this conversation, and not give up, as I said. It is a challenge, it is a long road, but the foundation is able to provide that platform. And it is a structured form between the People's Forum and discussions with the foreign ministers. So that is already in place, and I think your views would be heard. What is most important is not to say it has to be done, but it is very important. I think the ministers would be happy to hear how it is to be done. That is very important. Thank you.
Thanks. I think what I can add on is First of all, I agree with what was said, a suggestion on how to move forward. But I think I should add a point that expertise of youth need to be highlighted, because for so long youth have been approached in a tokenistic manner. But I believe that now youth are ready to be active stakeholders and work together with the charter to make it viable and sustainable on the longer run. And on the side of including all people, I think one of the best ways to do it is to recognize and valorize local actors, because in most of the cases, local actors are grown-up people, are indigenous people who understand the technology and they understand the nature of everything around our community. But most of the time, they fail to be recognized because they did not go to school, for example, they don't have a PhD. But most of the time, what the PhD doctor or consultant is going to prove is a similar thing that our elder will be saying. So there's a need to recognize their value and include them on the national and the global level. And then on the other question about how KPI should be included, I just want to invite everyone to read the climate policy of Rwanda, because that's one of my best examples to see how a policy can move from being a document to have concrete action on the ground. That means a lot on the current generation, the next one, because yes, policy is important, but also having concrete action, that's being able to invite all actors to be stakeholders is important, and that's one of my best documents to really share. And around what I will give as a message to the Commonwealth institution. So for me, I think strengthening the planet and investing the green and circular economy to allow sustainable achievement of economic growth is important. But from the message from the Prime Minister from Barbados at the Climate Summit in Glasgow last year, reminding that the impact of climate change, referred to as loss and damage, is no longer something that we are fascinating in the future, is our current reality. And her ask was, when will the global leader lead, as people are watching? And we are watching, and we have our eyes open. It's not rocket science to understand that the major development sector are threatened by the climate change. So these rise the vulnerability to achieve a sustainable development in most of our country and community. So if we share a common planet, let us build a global solidarity that take concrete climate action. I repeat, that take concrete climate action. Climate finance for adaptation is crucial, but the need to have the finance to address the loss and damage on the ground is equally important. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our panelists. Brilliant. Panelists, thank you very much. You may now leave the stage. Oh, they need to stay. I'm so sorry. You need to stay. Oh, yes, we have.
We're actually good to go. I think we need to go into the final speeches, which you'll introduce, Mark?
Yes,
okay.
100%. Before I introduce, I just want to make sure you are continuing the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, with the QR code on the bookmarks. Please make sure you're clicking on that and continuing the conversation. We want to hear all that you have to say. So we're going to move swiftly into our closing ceremony, and we would like to hear, obviously, from a couple of people that have been very much instrumental in today and for the past couple of days. So I would like to introduce to the stage Dr. Anne T. Gallagher, firstly, to come up to the stage, and she's going to have a little bit of a chat with you, or say a few words, and also to introduce Dr. Usta Katesi. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwanda Governance Board, RGB. She is a commissioner in the Rwanda Law Reform Commission, and Dr. Katesi previously served as the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the RGB, the Principal of the College of Arts and Social Sciences of the University of Rwanda, and served in different capacities at the UR Law School. She was the Vice Chairperson of the Technical Support Commission to the Parliament of Rwanda for the review of the Constitution of the Republic of Rwanda in 2015. Dr. Katesi was a member of the Rwanda Bar Association and the East African Law Society. She holds a PhD in law from the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands and a Master's of Law at the University of Ottawa, Canada, and a bachelor's degree from the then University of Rwanda. She has published in the areas of law, human rights, and gender, including the book entitled Genocidal Gender and Sexual Violence: The Legacy of the ICTR, Rwanda's Ordinary Courts, and the Gakaka Courts. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Usta Katezi.
Everyone, we've been, are you hearing me? It's a bit hard to recognise up here. So we've been so strict with you over these last couple of days, and you've been so wonderful being chased back into the room. So we did adjust the program to allow us to just say a couple of words now, and then you can have your tea break in peace without being bothered by us anymore. So Dr. Usta is the main attraction here. So I'm just going to say a couple of words. And yeah, where do I begin? First of all, I just have to thank, we've got some of our speakers up here, but I just have to thank everyone. I feel so proud and humbled that we were able to assemble such a stellar group of clever, wise, kind, compassionate people who were also provocative and who also pushed us. So yeah, I really, words fail me on that. Also to all of the participants here, you were just great. You were, like, every time I looked back or every time I looked up here, I saw people leaning forward, and really that's what you want to see, don't you, in an event like this. Mark and Victoria, yeah, what can I say? I think everyone will find a way to thank you at some point in their own way, but you've just been brilliant, holding everything together. Foundation team, yeah, I again, lost for words. And also our Rwanda host. This has been such an interesting relationship because in the normal course of things, we would have met maybe 6 months before CPF and worked quite intensely and then gone away. But I feel like I've made a lifelong friend with Dr. Usta and her team because we had 2.5 years together. And I feel like as well, it's come through. It's come through in the coherence of what we've been able to pull together and in what's come out of the last couple of days. So I don't really have too much more to say except to urge you along the lines of what our fellow speakers here did it is a privilege that we were here, and I feel like I want to do justice to what we've done over the next couple of days and make the foundation better and bolder and more strategic and even more in the service of Commonwealth civil society, because that's our function. That's the reason we exist, and you should be holding us to account for that. And of course, we should all be holding ourselves to account, our institutions, the Commonwealth, and our governments, because we know very well something that the Secretary General said is so true. You know, doing nothing or not doing enough, that's also a decision. And we know that we can't afford that. We know that there's too much happening and it's happening too fast. And if we don't grab hold of this opportunity and run with it, then we can't foresee the future, but we can be very frightened. Thank you very much for everything.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I don't know where to start. I enjoyed myself. I hope you did. I want to start by thanking my co-host. You know, when we started off with this journey of organizing the People's Forum, the predecessor of Anne came in the first mission. And in the next mission, Anne was in the picture. And only yesterday, we learned something that is common within us. So we learned that we are alumni of the same school for our PhDs. Now, I say that deliberately. I say that because really the Commonwealth, and yesterday we did a lot of interrogation on that. What is common and what is the wealth that is left? I want to say that there are certain things that are certainly common. It is common that we are the people. We will constantly be the people, you know? So that is very common in us. You know what else I found out that is common? I found out that we are common in diversity. So we kept on thinking, talking about what everyone brings to the table, about the contribution of each of us and making the difference of the Commonwealth. That's what we are supposed to be doing. I am a very conscious woman as a woman. There are certain things I don't know. You know, yesterday I danced with my brother Richard. And I looked at how many other people were standing, and I know they were getting tired. And my sister, you know who won the dancing competition? You both. The enjoyment. You know, yesterday you told me so much that disability is not inability. Just by being together, you know, by how much we enjoyed our music. And I think that's why we really wanted this Commonwealth People's Forum to be an in-person relationship. Because I know you. I have connected with you. I have known your great abilities. At some point, I lost the energy. I don't know where you were picking your energies from, but you kept the energy. You spoke more than I spoke. So it's how much energy, how much we contribute, how much more we contribute. So the diversity, I really like us to appreciate the diversity. So I kept thinking about diversity. And so yesterday when I was thinking about diversity, I thought about what I was going to wear. And this is, I'm just giving you what I went through. And I did this conversation with Grace earlier. A friend of mine had told me, this is a professional forum. And unfortunately, the colonial discussion that we had through here convinced me that an African wear is not a professional wear. Those are the things we need to interrogate, absolutely. So I decided, well, I will not wear my traditional dress because it has its processes. There is a way I want to look when I wear it. Then I decided, but at least I'm on the continent. So I'm going to be as colorful as the continent is. And Anne knows. So Anne knows the university we both went to for our PhDs has this particular rule on defense. So on your PhD defense, you wear white, black, or gray, except if you're wearing traditional. So for me, on my defense, I chose to wear yellow, a yellow silk traditional dress. It was in the middle of December. It was dark. My skin is beautiful dark. I didn't want to go gray. And I don't blame them, you know. It is in the Netherlands, they are white. It's okay, they can go gray and look great. I didn't want to feel dark in terms of just the colors that they chose, because that was designed in a particular perspective. I appreciate the perspective. I don't want to look at it from a blaming angle necessarily all the time. They thought on what brings out the brightness. I thought on what brings me the brightness. And Grace, you're taking the stage. I asked Grace, you know, what Grace is wearing in the head is very traditional for Rwanda. But we only wear it when we wear our traditional dress. And I told her, you know, we thought of the same. And she told me, so many times people don't identify me as Rwandan. So I wanted to stand out as Rwandan. You stood out, Grace. But I'm still talking about our diversity. I think we don't want to lose ourselves into the common. The commonness of us is we are the people and we are diverse. And I think some of the discussions that we've had here, I am sorry to qualify. We have been over-informed by discrimination. So sometimes the discrimination pushes us to just speak for the constituencies. Can we speak? I don't mind if my brother from the disabled speaks about me as a woman without disability. Can we integrate that inclusive mindset all the time as we move forward? Because the power of us as humanity stands in our diversity, but in the fact that we have a common planet. We have a common future. Either we insist on being in the same boat, or on swimming together, or drawing apart. So I have been seated and being quiet for quite some time. I enjoyed the core element of the civil society. Part of what my institution and Anne's institution does is to pull out for governance, good governance and democracy, and to enable the civil society to be at the center of that. There is a very good presumption on the civil society that you represent those voices. Do not become just the voices yourselves. Remember the voices that you represent. Otherwise, you will be victims of the things that you want to change. So can we be the voices of everything we want to change? So today, I was speaking with one of the speakers, and he said, my biggest question is this: what do you not want in the future? I want us to reflect on that. There are so many things we've spoken about that are not right in the past. But what do you not want in the future? What great knowledge of the aged do you want to bring forth in the future? Rwanda embarked on her homegrown solutions in reconstruction. We stand in a nation where the national anthem was written by the perpetrators of genocide in prison. And our national anthem is very much forward-moving. They had the time to compete, and we got the best national anthem that describes all of us. So each voice matters. So as we are the voice of the people, can we listen of the other people? Now let me tell you what else I thought about when I was thinking about the charter. Did you know that there was no civil society in the writing, in the ending of the We the People? Because the heads of governments are also part of the people. Do we realize that if we are not conscious of being informed by only discrimination, some of the people will be excluded in the people? We have probably the best name of all forums, don't we? We are the people. Who is not a person? Of the people, who is not a person? So the dialogue, how can we push the spaces that make us antagonistic and bring us to dialogue? It was very much highlighted by all the panelists. We disagree, and that's very healthy. We challenge, that is extremely healthy. But when do we listen? I got the privilege of spending so much time listening here until I had to speak. I hope we spend that much time listening so much and speak only when we think we have to speak. Let's exercise the listening. A voice that doesn't listen becomes noise. I'm sorry to say. Did I say that? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. My culture doesn't. But if we do become voices that never listens, we just become noise. And we are the voice. The voice that speaks about the things that matter in our future. So as I close, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank you because you believe in the Commonwealth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this room. You all made the distances. You all took the time. You all faithfully stayed in this room. I think we got the most disciplined People's Forum. Because when we started off with Anne, she was so afraid that people leave the room and we speak to an empty room. Sometimes the only chairs that were empty were for the speakers. Thank you very much for believing in this process. The last thing that I know that we share existential threats. We continue to exist together or we drown apart. The pandemic that disrupted, I am glad it expanded my relationship with Anne. You know, I love to count my blessings. A lot of the challenges we spoke about are great steps in themselves. But how can we do better? And I think that's the question that stood. The existential threats cannot permit us anymore to continuously not talk about the people. There is a person behind developing and developing states, developing and developed states. There is a person in every home of the small islands. There is a person in every small state. There is 2.5 billion people. I think the greatest power of the Commonwealth is in us, the people. Not the geographical locations, not the historical underpinnings, and as a Rwandan, I really appreciate those who are in the Commonwealth way before us. The flexibility of the Commonwealth permitted us to be here. So the Commonwealth is progressive, I must say. We do not share with a lot of people the history of colonialism. We thought the Commonwealth is a great family to come into. And as the most youthful of nations in this relationship, we are given the space that the youth want if we could host you. And I hope you will not blame us for the mistakes, because we learn by mistakes. And we all have committed some in the journey. So to conclude, Anne, I want to thank you very much. Thank you very much, my alumni. And I want to ask you, each of the person that you're next to, spend some time and find out what is common. Do you know that we spend so much time and find out what is not common? Can you spend some time and find out what is common? But also, can you spend some time and enjoy the diversity? Enjoy the differences. Enjoy the beauty. Do not judge, you know? Appreciate those differences. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you to all the panelists. I do not know how we found all of you. I have no idea how you, all great panelists, trusted us. First of all, how did you trust us? How in the universe could you find Mark and Victoria as your hosts? Isn't that a great thing? Can we appreciate them? They held us accountable, but I enjoyed each of their words. I missed the voice training, so don't judge me. I want to appreciate the delegates. You did amazing. You were faithful on time. You're faithful on honoring one another's opinion, and that's what is common in us. So thank you very much for trusting this process. We have amazing team members from the Commonwealth Foundation, from the Rwanda Governance Board, and from our partner, the Rwanda Civil Society Platform, the tripartite organization of this CHOGM. Thank you very much for bringing up this process and for being able to deliver on this. I want to thank the hosting hotel. A few things can be improved. I was a teacher in my past life, so. But also at the governance board, we do scorecards for all the different service delivery providers. And therefore, I cannot lose that responsibility that I maintain. But thank you for keeping us safe in this room, for keeping us healthy with the foods, and for doing a great job. And finally, we are the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much once again to Dr. Eusta and Gallagher for their final remarks, and the panelists as well. Thank you. One more round of applause for them as we wrap up the session.